Hi everyone, apologies, we've had a few little technical hiccups there, so do apologise for being slightly late. My name's Nathan Blackwell from Brickworks Building Products. I'm the Business Development Manager in New South Wales. So just like to welcome on behalf of Brickworks our team around the country and all our architects that are supporting and watching what is our fourth instalment of our At Home with Architects event, featuring tonight Shaun Carter of Carter Williamson. At the end of Shaun's talk, he is available for some questions. You see in your bottom corner or bottom of the screen there, there's a Q&A section where if you just type in those questions throughout, and at the end, we'll go through those and answer some of those. This month, Brickworks has been presenting with Archiflix a whole series of short films on Friday nights. This Friday night is again on. It'll be the last one, obviously, for the month. So there's a couple of films there. The first one is If You Build It, which is a documentary which follows a year in the life of an innovative design-based high school program, culminating the design and 16-week construction of a farmers market pavilion, the only farmers market pavilion in the US designed and built by high school students. After that, there's then one called Visual Acoustics, which celebrates the life and career of Julia Schulman. So if you haven't seen anything on registration for that, have a look at the Brickworks events page, and you can follow the information there to register for those. But tonight, obviously, we're speaking with Shaun Carter. So Shaun's the founding architect and principal of Carter Williamson Architects in Sydney. Shaun came to architecture with a structural engineering degree and many years working in the construction industry. I first met Shaun just before he was awarded the Emerging Architects Prize in New South Wales for 2014. And I remember having quite a few jokes asking Shaun if he's emerged all over the years. But Shaun then went on to become the New South Wales president for the Institute of Architects from 2015 to 2017, and really led the fight for Save Our Serious in Sydney as well. And I think I don't know whether he's happy with how the outcome came with that or not, but definitely was the lead sort of fighting for that. The experience provides the anchor points for Carter Williamson's architectural expression to be fully explored. And Shaun believes architecture is a construction of ideas represented as sequences of space illuminated by natural light. These ideas form the spaces we live in and move through and make us feel better for having been in. Architecture should make our lives better. Shaun's often said to me, he's also on a mission to bring red brick back. I think over the last few years, we've actually seen quite a few red bricks starting to appear in Sydney. And, I know Shaun's always sort of leading the push there for some of those as well. But anyway, I hope you enjoy Shaun's talk. And as I said, we'll get some questions at the end. So please welcome Shaun Carter.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, we'll get some of those red brick buildings up pretty soon. An answer to your question about Sirius is that the building has been saved. So the great effort that not only Save Our Sirius did, but more broadly the architectural community that came together behind that fight, that great fight that we led, and Rosso was also part of that, I think was successful. And architects, again, have embraced that building, and in its new state, I think will be a wonderful outcome for the building. Maybe not for the community, but that's a political consideration, and we're probably going to try and avoid the politics tonight. Let's talk about architecture. So thanks everyone for joining tonight. I hope I keep you awake. This should be interesting. I think we're calling it Behind the Curtain. You can see that black screen just about where my hand is. That's a reference to how we work in the studio. We're big open plan. We have a big, lovely black velvet curtain. And tonight we're hoping we're pulling that away a little bit to show you a little bit of how we work and how we think about our buildings, sort of a behind the scenes approach to how Carter Williamson looks at our buildings. And we'll do that through 2 buildings. We'll do it through a home, Concrete Blonde, which is just finished, and another building which will be a public building, which is also just finished. So some interesting new content to look at, but to show you how these ideas play out in similar ways with 2 different types of buildings, but also in slightly different ways. So I'll get started and I'll share the screen. And I'll talk to you about 5 ideas that we use to shape and explore our architecture. I hope you can all see the screen there, and I'll start. So behind the curtain, the ideas that help shape our buildings, and looking at through 2 buildings. The 2 buildings will be Concrete Blonde. You see that off to the left, that lovely little single-storey, single-loaded corridor terrace house in Sydney, and the Woodcraft Neighbourhood Centre, a public building in Doonside in Blacktown. So the first idea that we'll talk to you about, and how we, it's probably the biggest thing that we always talk about at the start of every project, is our public agenda. Every project should be a little bit bigger than itself, we believe, and clients will bring you a brief, and they want you to satisfy that brief. And what we're always looking to do within that brief is how can we add something to that project that will be a little bit bigger than itself. It's what we think our grand gesture or our grand gift to architecture is. So if we think about Concrete Blonde, and it's a house, so I guess the great question always there is, what can a house provide? Can provide a street for the public realm in a public sense. And houses quite often do this, and this is not something that we really gifted this building to this street, but here you can see Concrete Blonde, and it is doing exactly what it needs to do to the street. A lovely restored facade. There's a front door to the street. There's windows to the street. It's very legible. You know how this house works. You know how it operates. You know there are people behind that front door. Another thing with housing that we don't always think about it in a public sense is this is a building in a heritage conservation area. Carter Williamson has always taken heritage seriously. We don't see ourselves per se as only heritage architects, but rather architecture with heritage can be complementary. So here we've restored this lovely little row house sitting in a suite of 7 terraces sliding down the street in Annandale. But not only do you read the heritage on the outside, we think you should read the heritage on the inside. Here we've painted everything a quite democratic white, so that you could read elements without I guess the other story that colour sometimes brings. So here you can see we've kept everything in the front part of the house, the lovely arch, but then we reinterpreted the arch at the rear of the building, that threshold between the old and the new. We've got a steel arch, which is telling us that we're about to move into the next part. So that interpretation of heritage. And I guess with Concrete Blonde, there was this other aspect, and it's a more planning aspect of the building being a little bit bigger than itself. We've added some construction photos here. So you see that top image, and that's showing you can see there, we're looking back at the building. The building's been pulled apart. We're about to set up the form for the concrete pour on the 2nd story. And really it was a conversation with the council. It's the Inner West Council. As people in Sydney know, this is a challenging council to work with. But here was a great conversation with council about this idea of shared amenity and shared effect. We knew we were one of the first, well, we really were the first in this row to go and develop, and we would have an effect on our neighbouring buildings, and then they in turn would have an effect on us. So understanding that, that contribution that we would make, that effect that we would make, and really discussing about the shared amenity and shared effect of what shadow that we would cast, and how, and negotiating that with council. So coming up with that line of what an acceptable shadow was, and then designing within that to make sure that that was not only acceptable for neighbouring buildings, but fully understanding that that would be something that would come into play for us later in the piece. Of course, moving to Woodcraft, and Woodcraft's being a public building, it sort of comes ready-made with that great public agenda. So what more does a public building really need to do? Well, I think every building can be a little bit bigger than itself, and with Woodcraft it was no different. And how we approached the site with Woodcraft was really adopting Eliel Saarinen's great observation. Always design a thing by considering it in its next larger context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment in a city plan. So to think about Woodcraft and how that might be by putting, and we were engaged to put a community centre back in a park that was burnt down. So how can this building do more than just be itself? Could it be a catalyst for change? So we looked at that, we looked at if the building was the chair, the park was the room, and what could we do with the room? The park had great bones. It was like a little mini or centennial park out at Doonside. And here you can see that great suburban intervention that quite often happens where you see the car slipping into our public places. So the brown areas here are the car parks that were in the building, within the park, and we thought, well, as a catalyst for change, what we would do would we'd master plan the site, and the building would help eliminate some of these things that we saw as bad interventions within the public realm. So we wanted to take the car parking out of the park, and you can see here what we've done is we've replanned it to be on the edges of Woodcraft Park, and that would do two things. That would liberate the park of more land so that people had more public space to use. But by putting car parking to the edge, particularly that Woodcraft Drive edge, what it would do, it would slow the traffic down, and slowing the traffic down around the park would make it more friendly, but it also give people the opportunity to see the park and possibly engage more with it. The building as a catalyst for change with the park, we also saw it as doing many things, giving it a front door to the street, giving it a bridge from the street to the lake, but also framing out the green square. So here you can see how the little dotted lines there are where the old building was and where the new building is shown in that burnt orange, and how that we frame an edge of what is a new green square for a park that really is quite embraced by the Filipino and Indian communities of Doonside for their festival days. But it also had to do the fundamental things right as well. What the building wasn't before was it wasn't visible, it wasn't friendly, it was hidden behind trees, it was locked off behind a fence. It was poorly built and didn't do any of those public gestures at all. So it was probably no surprise that it was burnt down one night. So our approach to this building was to be the exact opposite to whatever that building was. So we wanted to give it, we wanted to make it very public, make it very visible. It's in a suburban setting, so we wanted to give it these lovely suburban qualities. It's a reasonable sized building, but not too big. It's 900 square metres under roof, or nearly 600 square metres of habitable, usable space. So here you can see that great angled window to the street, which is really always open and always inviting. It's a window that's saying it's yours. And then you can see that lovely awning leading to a front door. So again, that legibility that we saw in Concrete Blonde is also here within Woodcraft. You can see the front door and you can know where it is. The other aspect, and the very public aspect, was giving it a great veranda. This veranda is always public, it's always usable. It connected you from the street and brought you all the way down through to the lake. And it also then does that other wonderful device that it starts to become the stage and the frame of the edge of the public square. Housing the other door, this is a cross access for the building. That's the access into the foyer that then leads you into the hall, really the setup or the beginning of the stage. And here you can see at the opening, it was a big festival day, and the council invited the people to come and experience their building. It was a great day. There was about 2,000 people came along. We thought it'd be pretty popular. There was lots of noise as we were building the building, of people coming by and chatting with us, chatting with the builders, wanting to know what it is. and to get the people there and to use it as the square was a great start. We even heard that we actually got all the councillors at the opening, which is apparently pretty rare, that this building was able to straddle the political divide within council. So it had something going for it from the get-go. The second thing we'll talk about as an idea that shapes our architecture is materials. And something more and more that we're talking about is the provenance of those materials that we use within our buildings. A saying that we always have in the office and that we use a lot is that the colours and textures of the materials, we want to become the colours and textures of the building. These would be the materials that would help inform the building. They would be rough, they would be robust, sorry, they would be honest. You know, sayings like bricks are thin tiles and tiles are thin bricks. These materials would make the building easier to live in. It'd be warmer, it'd be more inviting. And the great thing about a material, particularly, and let's use brick as a reference for a Brickworks talk, is the great thing about a whole material like a brick is it's like a bit like a whole food movement. We think it's a healthier thing. So the building not only looks good when it's first done, we think it looks good in 5 years' time, 20 years' time, 50 years' time, and hopefully in 100 years' time as it gets that lovely patina of life, but we know that those wonderful natural products will look good then. So exploring materiality through concrete blonde, we come to the first idea with concrete. You know, like many architects in this country, particularly, concrete's this great material we're always playing with. It's very plastic, although we tend to use it more in this very static kind of arrangement. But here, the idea with concrete blonde is wherever you saw a horizontal surface within the new part of the building, that would tell you that it was a concrete surface, or the concrete surface would tell you that it's horizontal. And it would be textured. The lovely polished concrete floor of the base with some of Irene's personal effects in there as an emotional connection to the material, and then the textured material of the roof. This is a row house. This is a terrace house. It's party walls, boundary to boundary. And in that great terrace vernacular, you've got your long boundaries with these very shuttered and closed walls. This is 5 metres boundary to boundary, so internally it's a little bit under 4.5 metres, so spatially quite constrained. So we wanted to use, we're using this lovely white brick, this Chillingham white, to allow it to be nice and light. We think that's a lovely sympathetic colour compositionally with the concrete, just to help that light bounce around the space. And then thinking about the composition of using the concrete and the blonde brick, which is really where the reference or the name of the building comes from. Concrete Blonde, which is a favourite band of mine in the late 80s, which is probably giving up my age a little bit. But then using the lovely Tasmanian oak, this is a lovely soft coloured timber. Compositionally, we think it's working really beautifully with the white brick and the lovely light grey of the concrete. The service wall of the building, and this runs through the core of the base, is this lovely green kitchen. That's referential. It relates to the client's lovely connection to a green kitchen that existed in the house before we got there. Really reminded her of this house and this place and of her home. But it also connected to the lovely conversations we had through the development of the design of this building, which is to connect with the gardens. The green of the gardens was very much part of the spirit of the design. So we got that green that helped really make it a lovely, warm and friendly colour. Thinking about the materials externally, being a row house and a terrace house, you get the lovely presentation of the terracotta and the slate to the street, which is always your presentation facade. And very quickly, as you got behind that building, you've got the corrugated iron of the tunnel back really lean-tos. And here we kept with that material. So we've got the lovely corrugated iron, or the zinc loom of the material at the rear. That's referencing the type of material used within the building. And then if we think about materials and we move over to Woodcraft, and again, being a public building and a new building, it had more scope to think more deeply and more broadly about what it is. So Woodcraft, you can see, hopefully you can see on your screens there, that lovely little white lines over that brick quarry. So Woodcraft Lake was an old brick quarry, and you can see off to the right of your screen there, the brickworks that made the bricks. So we thought it was necessary that Woodcraft would be anchored in brickwork. So here you can see the development, that great suburban sprawl that Sydney had, so that the bricks that were made on this site also helped to make many of the houses that grew up in around Woodcraft Lake that filled the brick quarry. So the material ideas here was to have brick as the base of this building. So it was almost like the whole base was hewn out of the brick. So the floor of the building is brickwork, and we took the brickwork up to a 2.7 height. And you can see this isometric drawing where we've shown the top of the walls at that 2.7, which is that very strong, robust height of the building. Being a public building, by necessity, these buildings need to be really withstand quite a heavy impact of public use. They need to be strong, they need to be robust, they need to be tough. And our idea, sort of under the 3.2 metre datum height, that this building would be pretty well unbreakable. So bricks up to 2.7 metres. And here we can see in this lovely sectional photo where the brick base sits there and then the walls rise out of that brick base. And then we've got this lovely concrete apron that floats around the edges that ties it all together. And that goes up to a 3.2 metre height. So everything under 3.2 metres is effectively unbreakable. It's brick, it's concrete, it's steel. And then you start to see here that lovely billowing shape of that serpentine roof that we'll talk a little bit more about later on. And the ephemeral quality that Dampelon brings to separate the lovely rolling roof over that solid brick base. Here's some detailed shots of how that composition, that really strong and robust composition comes together. The brick base, the lovely soft rolling valencing of the timber, the strong steel columns that are curved, and that concrete edge. You can see that concrete edge there, framing out the top of the bays of the window bays where the doors open up, and you can see the roof rolling on. And there's a detail how the Dampelon moves up to embrace this lovely rolling serpentine roof. Again, in this zincalume material that is referential to the older buildings of the area. And here we see it all put together with the brick base seen here through the grand veranda. You see the serpentine roof floating above the spaces. And we think materially this building really is quite simple, but does everything it needs to do in that very honest and transparent way with the materials that we use. So the third part, and this is, we expect that there's lots of architects on the talk tonight, so we've deliberately framed it in a very architectural way. So with Carter Williamson, in that very Corbusian tradition, the plan is the generator. We almost always start with the plan as working out the organisation of the ideas and the programmatic requirements of the building. But specifically here tonight, we'll talk to you about courtyards within that plan and how the plan generates around those courtyards. And we'll look at it through the prism of concrete blonde and Woodcraft. But the courtyard is not a new thing to Carter Williamson. We put the courtyard in every one of our buildings where we can. There's been some exceptions where we've internalised that courtyard, or the program is so small that you don't need a courtyard, but almost all buildings have one. We generally do two different types of courtyards. Those ones you see in the top of your screen there, screen house to the left and light cannon to the right, are more like a James Sterling Stutz Gallery kind of courtyard, what we call the forbidden garden, or the garden you'd look into and enjoy for the pleasure of what it is rather than being in. We generally put window seats to these gardens, so you have this very personable and intimate quality with that courtyard garden, but you're not designed to be in there. The other one, of course, is the opposite to that, the one you are designed to be in here. So the bottom left image is upsize, downsize house, or over to truss house, where the courtyards really are an attachment to the space adjacent to it, that you can occupy, you can sit in. Plus, they're also giving a quality to the spaces beside them. If we move over to concrete blonde and we explore the courtyard, and this is not something that Carter Williamson does uniquely, of course. I think just about every architect is deploying a courtyard to good effect, because it does so many wonderful things for you. Here you see the plans of concrete blonde. We're using the courtyard here in the centre of the plan to separate new from old, to allow the circulation to sit by the stair, so it becomes the stair also helps to become the light and lungs of the house. It also helps us to play with ideas that no room is really more than about one room deep. Every room gets a window to an external source. So here we see the courtyard of concrete blonde. The courtyard here is, again, a courtyard not designed to actually be in. It's going to be this lovely garden, this lovely green screen. Here you can see the black tiles. That courtyard faces northwest, so there's going to be an intensity of light in there. So what we're trying to do deliberately with the black tiles is to dull that light, so it's not too intense. But like Cannon and the other projects that we do, you can see that you can sit into the walls here and enjoy that courtyard. And of course, we want the courtyard to illuminate the house, to have that, typically in these terrace houses, the brightest place of the house. So there's the light, and here you can see the beginning of the lungs of the courtyard. So we've these windows face northwest. We've planted these screens. This planting is 3 months into the occupation of the house. They've been in there nearly 9 months now. So this screen is heavily grown. So we want this to completely bush out and close off these windows. And the idea that you'd open the louvers and you get that lovely purifying effect of the plants providing the screen. And of course, that courtyard here in this image, we like this image because you can see the borrowed light in the stairwell of the courtyard windows beyond, but you can also see how it played out beautifully for this bathroom here, where, you know, this lovely, in the section, it's a lovely tall reaching space. It's up to about 3.4 metres. So we're able to have all the necessary service requirements on the walls of mirrors, of cabinets, of showers, and yet still get a ribbon window across the whole top of the bathroom, so you can be private and it can be beautifully lit within the space. And then thinking about moments within moments, little gardens that sit in window boxes that are really thriving on the humid air of a bathroom. To again, it's this biophilic idea of plants making you feel better, to being in that conversation we were having with the clients about gardens in their place. So they're finding moments to always have a little garden in there. To think about Woodcraft and plan as the generator, and also that how a courtyard played its part in the generation of the plan and the ideas of Woodcraft. Woodcraft is really a 3-spine or 3-bar project. Here you can see the first bar, which is the grand veranda that takes you from the street all the way through to the lake and then frames out one edge of the green square. That's always there for circulation. I guess the second spine or bar of the program is the service spaces. The service spaces hold the toilets, holds the storage, holds the plant room, and also the kitchen that serves the hall, and the rooms that are served by that service wall is really the reason for the generation of the brief, the rooms that are needed for the program of the building. The community room facing the street, the office for community needs, and you can see that separated by a courtyard there, and over to the great hall that is there for the use of the public and entertainment. So highlighted here is the green. That's the courtyard that separates the community room that's designed for 20 people, and we've got an office that's really designed for 2. And what that does is it allows us, and it was really quite a tantalising little prospect, that in a great public park, that you could create this lovely little walled garden within the building. And it wasn't, I mean, it's private in a public sense. The people can hire the rooms and always use it, and it can have this other layer of landscape garden to the bigger conversation of what a park is for the people. You can see here, we can also do some, for want of a better word, some more fragile things with the building. We can allow louvers to open onto the courtyard so the corridor can breathe. We can have sliding doors that open both the office and the community room up to embrace the garden. Thankfully, we've got enough rain post that drought, and the garden's really thriving within that space. And you can see this is a courtyard, again, the opposite to what we did with Concrete Blonde. This is a courtyard designed to be in. The community room we knew was going to be used for mothers groups and parental groups, which is a great way of having this outdoor space so you can get the great amenity of being outside. But with children being cared for and parents can be together and having that moment of relief when the kids are playing with each other and they can have some adult time, at least you know that you've got this lovely walled arrangement, although outdoor space, so that kids aren't playing down by the lake. The next thing we'll talk about, another idea, is spatial joy, which is really a sectional idea. So how do we work with the section to make that plan come alive? We see the section as where all the spatial joy is, and like plan is the generator, the section is where all the joy in a building is. The plan organises the program in the space and sets up the framework for the ideas, but then the section plays its part to realise those ideas, and hopefully beautifully so. So here's a number of buildings from Brise Soleil where we use, in the section, we use a big void to bring light deep into the plan. That is quite challenged for space, but the void is also holding space, as it does with Peekaboo in the middle image. And over we see Light Cannon House, where we're using the roof as really quite a device to reach up over a northern wall to grab that light and pull it deep within the plan. Down below, Greenhouse, where we're using a slot void as spatial divider to organise the program, or Rugby House, where you sit in around a gallery that looks into the life of the home. So always playing with the idea of section. Roof and the ceiling plane has a big part to do with that section. We want that to be, we never want to see the roof as a dumb hat on a building. We always want that roof to be a little bit more. So here we're looking at the joy of the section with Concrete Blonde. You can see here how we're sculpting or really ripping down or tapering that roof plane of Concrete Blonde to the south, because we set a solar axis shadowing requirement to the building. So here you can see that they're really pinching of that rear through the section there to allow that light quality that we agreed with council and the neighbours that this was the amount of shared amenity and shared effect that we'd have with them. The section there is separating the new from old, but you can also see a couple of things through the joy of the section. You can see that lovely light strip that's reaching up to grab that northern light. The northern part of the building is to the left or to the street, so that light strip reaches up and grabs that light and brings light deep into the plan, into that living space, through, nearly 5 metres below the light strip, which potentially was the darkest part of the house. So this is really helping illuminate that, particularly in the early hours of the morning. And also that quite dynamic quality that the section gave, so the really tall reaching space of that bathroom, tapering down to a 2.1 height with a little Juliet balcony for the bedroom below. So here we see how that section played out in that upper plan, that tall reaching space of that 3.4 metre height of the bathroom and the room just next to it, which is kind of showing you how steep the slope of that section of the roof is, pinching down to 2.1, which that really tightening of the space in the bedroom we felt was was a really great way to represent a bedroom. Bedrooms really are there for sleeping. You're more horizontal in that space, and also being a more personal space, having it as a tighter space and more personal and more intimate, where the bathrooms, really you're standing at the basin or in the shower, it's a more of a vertically proportioned space, and so too is the section with it. And here we start to see the idea of the void through that section, where the void here is a little bit different from how we've used a void before. We're not using it to divide program, but we're using it to illuminate the space. So it's in a way holding the room by having this great light source in the middle. Here you can see in the middle of the living room, you're looking up that 4 and 5 metres to that light scoop, where it's grabbing that northern light and bringing it down into the plan. You can see that the void allows you to have this really beautiful quality of light, particularly early in the morning. You get this, you do feel this serene quietness of being separated by a courtyard and a couple of rooms from the street, and you've got the backyard and the living spaces beyond. And here in the middle of the space, in the morning where we're warming up and getting ready to have our more public lives as we leave the front door of the house, you can be in this really quiet and lovely space within the middle of the building. The Woodcraft, we experience the joy of the section in a different way. The joy of the section, we have that lovely flat plane of the Cumberland Plain that we see out there in Doonside. Woodcraft is incredibly flat. It's really low, and Woodcraft as a lake is as much a stormwater detention device as it is a community lake. So it's got this other bigger infrastructural idea to it. So with the spatial joy of the building, we needed to find it vertically. It wasn't going to be through a stepping plan. And here's a diagram that we've recreated for this presentation, but one that was live and real as we were developing the idea of what this building would become above the plan. What would this building spatially be once we had worked out the areas of the plan? And what we were doing is we're working with the idea of the golden mean, and the golden mean would tell us what heights those floor areas of those different rooms of community room, office, foyer, and hall needed to be proportionally right. We wanted these rooms to feel proportionally right. So here you can see a tracing of those, the extruding of the plan into a volume, and then tracing that line over above. I don't want to over egg it, but we saw it almost as like a Whiteley line, a Brett Whiteley line, playing with this curvaceous form that would be this linking element that would hold the spaces and join the roof together. And pleasantly and joyfully, we think that's been very successful. Certainly the feedback from the people, which for us is the most important feedback to get, the feedback and the client, is that this building, by the time it opened, was booked out for 18 months in advance, with use of the hall and the other community spaces with the office and the community room. So that's a testament to the quality. Here's the foyer. This room was really about holding you before you went in the main hall, but so successful as the space has been, it's become almost a smaller hall to be used. So this is really a room for more like 50 people. And it can hold you, and it's that pivot point at that cross link which brings you into the building, and you can decide to go one way or the other. And perhaps the most successful expression of that idea of the golden mean and making a room that is so proportionally right, maybe the best room we've made, I think, is the hall of Woodcraft, which I think this is a beautiful photo. Brett Bournemouth doing what Brett does so beautifully well and captures the quality of this space. It tells you that lovely horizontal narrative of the window where we see from the casuarina forest as we look left, as we sweep around the building, and we get to see the lake, which is very, very powerful part of this room, that horizontal slot view. But that luminous quality that the damp one brings, that naturally lights the room, but does give it, again, another really serene quality. You feel great for being in this room. It's heavily acoustically treated as well. So the white noise in this room is a big part of that. That really takes, that really adds to the quietness and the peacefulness that you feel in this room. Because it's really planned to deal with amplified noise for 200 people. So here we're looking back at that section, how it plays out. The section's quite interesting in that the room also fell from south to north. So not only are we rolling east to west, but we're falling from north to south. So it's an extraordinarily complex roof that gave us all nightmares here, particularly Ben, the project architect for the project. We really love this image here because it's really showing the true composition of the building in its purest sense, that lovely brick base, the warm valencing of the timber, that strong concrete apron, and the roof floating above that lovely luminous quality of the damp line. And here you see it all put together with the building acting in the evening as a lantern, so the darker, heavier materials become darker, and the roof also becomes darker in that sort of almost negative sort of quality, and then the luminous quality of the damp line sets them both apart. And the last idea we'll talk with you tonight about is really a humanist approach that we try and bring to all our buildings. We want our buildings to be soft and friendly things, almost that Alvar Aalto idea that we wanted to soften the edges to make these buildings really easy to live in and to be around. So sure, they're robust. You can really flog these buildings. They're really hardy. You can give them a good beating, and they'll be there for you. They'll respond. They won't be like a gallery. They're not fragile, but equally we want you to sit on them, lean on them, and do all those things that people want to do with the building. So let's explore the humanist approach and how we thought about it through the two different buildings, Concrete Blonde, a house, and Woodcraft, a public building. And the first aspect of that is we brought back a historical reference for an old building, which we thought was appropriate. And here's the wainscoting, this lovely timber edge, almost the inverse of what we did at Woodcraft, where we playing with these ideas of this lovely soft timber edge, particularly in bedrooms where that wainscoting can roll around a room. It can give you a date and to give you a reference to hold you in those more horizontal sort of settings, and then allowing it to thicken out for a bed head in that room. That room gets down to 2.1 here, but the lovely 1200 of the wainscoting through the room really helped to hold you in a room as the space started to climb. And here in the section you can see the space climbing as we move to the stair in the stepping section of the building. You can also see really soft things, a timber handrail. Again, this is not revolutionary things. This is something that we all do, but thinking about it from a humanist quality, we wanted it soft to touch, we wanted it warm to touch, and working with a very good builder that we've been working with for years, and talking him through how we wanted that handrail to be and him experiencing it. And a quality that we spoke about earlier, but we also think it's a very humanist quality, which is thinking about parts of the building that you can sit in and sit on. So here, that window seat, it could have easily been just doors, it could have easily been just a window, but we wanted it to be more. We wanted this other utilitarian quality of feeling that your building's friendly enough to be able to sit in and sit on. And we extended that quality to the dining room. Irene's a great cook and very generous with her cooking, and she shares that with people all the time. Building site visits were really a great occasion for all of us. We always had everyone in attendance, and then some. Once the word got out of Irene's lovely home-cooked cakes, the Greek called boudikor, and the fresh fruit and the food of the seasons. So Irene wanted a big kitchen. This was going to service this great cooking and this great love of hers of sharing her cooking with others, particularly her people, her close people. So that came with an idea that we wanted a big generous kitchen, but also a big generous dining room in 10 metres of length of a living space and within a touch less than 4.5 metres of width through the plan. So he was putting together the idea that the kitchen island could also be something that you could sit on or sit against, and that framed one edge in a very efficient way that housed a dining table that was the same length exactly as the island bench. So that 4.2 metres of the island became 4.2 metres of the kitchen bench. So this idea that you can sit in and around and embrace the built-in furniture or the built-in parts of the house. And that was a really warm thing to do. Concrete Blonde has a bathing room, which is a little bit more than a bathroom. This is a bigger room. It was an old bedroom. It also needed to be a laundry, and that's why it's a bigger program, but we didn't want you to necessarily get lost within this space, so that you could come into this room and, you know, as we know that bathrooms and bathing rooms are very personal things. We don't want you to feel completely impersonal within this space. So creating these little hold spaces. So we use this cupping device through the plan and extruding it through the elevation of these lovely little cupping devices that's holding you whilst on the toilet or within the shower. So informally making the rooms of the bathroom along the edge of the wall. Opposite to this, you can't see this photo, is a laundry, which is the wall just rolling around. You can see just a little bit of that laundry edge touching the back wall. And we felt that this was a lovely quality to give a building that made you feel a little bit more personal and a little bit more intimate in those private moments of the house. And how you experience that humanist approach with a public building. And of course, that should be the great gift of what your public building should be to the people. And we put this photo here at the front because this really says a lot about how the community and the people have really embraced this building. This is the Filipino community. These 5 rogues that photobombed Brett one morning when he was taking the photographs, and really periodically came and saw him throughout the day. We came to know these guys. We would meet them in the site meetings. The builders knew them on a first name basis as they were really keen to engage with the building of their building and as that building was realised. So we hopefully had sown in all these really humanist ideas of how this building could be and how it would be the exact opposite of the one that was before, because we wanted the people to love this building and to take possession of this building because we thought it was the best way to protect the building. So here you can just see some photos we've put into this presentation to show you how the building's very, very obvious and transparent and there to be lived in and embraced by the community. As it sits in the park, it's very much theirs and it's quite obviously theirs, and we want them to use it to sit in and around the building. We like the idea of the grand veranda always being there for the park, even if the building inside is not being used. You can use that as an outdoor space, always for the people. Thinking about those humanist qualities more specifically, here you can see that lovely rolling gesture, the curved plan of the main doors into the foyer, that lovely gesture to invite you into the building. But here you can see something more, that timber valencing around the top of the brickwork to move away from that tough, robust, hewn out of the ground brickwork idea to an idea around the service spine of the building is that we want you to lean on it. So even here on the outside, you can see these lovely curved timber elements. We want you to lean on the building. If you lean on the building, it won't hurt you. It'll be soft to touch. You can see here, just off to the right of that image, you can see that timber valencing running down the edge. But also, wherever possible, building in edges of or places within the building and without the building where that you can sit in. So here in the foyer, just building in a little moment that you can sit in as you're waiting. Here you can see people just naturally embracing that on the opening day festival. And another one of these great images that we love, because these happen as we hope they would happen, without the sort of the naturally staged ones you do with the photography. This here is on the community day when the building was open, and here we can see the community sitting in that lovely window to the street. This is the window that's telling you that here in that domestic scale idea of here's the building, it's a public building and it is yours. And in this community room, at that deepest point there, that window is 2.2 metres deep. And we can see generations of the family sitting here on that community day and using the building exactly as we intended it, that you can sit comfortably in it and it's friendly to touch. And on the outside, all these little moments within the landscaping. We worked with a lovely and wonderful landscape architect that we do a lot of work with, Melissa Wilson, who designed this very beautiful landscape that sat beautifully with the building. And the brief that Melissa embraced and successfully delivered was to have moments that you can sit on the grand stairs outside the veranda overlooking the lake, and that was always a place we wanted you to use. And little platforms that you can sit just off the grand veranda that you can just sit on. And here's a lovely little photo in the middle where even the bike racks, in that happen chance kind of way, become a moment for kids to play and to be around the building. And this is my last slide, and we've put this slide here. This is our favourite slide of Woodcraft because we think this really encapsulates the building. But what we really want to say in the wrapping up, ideas that we've been exploring, these 5 ideas that we've been exploring for years now, with home and habitation and how you can live well within your own private environment, your own home, has translated well into a public setting for Woodcraft. And we thought that was a wonderful thing that happened, and I guess we didn't think about it too deeply, because when what we're really doing, even though we design different types of buildings with different programs, we're always designing buildings for people. And I think it's the people that are anchoring the building. And those ideas are lovely ideas to live with. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
Thanks, Shaun. That's fantastic. Obviously, 2 great projects there featuring brick. But I know looking at that, you seem to have a lot of curves in your projects, and I know a lot of materials, probably don't all necessarily work fantastic with curves. So do you find any sort of challenges with those?
Look, we do. The curve is something that we, to be perfectly honest, something I explored a lot through my university days, and then starting in practice. You almost can't afford a curve. Those early days where you're trying to get the maximum amount of building. I'm not purely just talking about floor space, but probably the better word is the maximum amount of architecture for the least amount of money, because you don't have much. So curves generally get value managed out of the project. So later in practice, where the budgets get a little bit better, and we can explore the idea of curves, doing all these really solving or answering the questions of those ideas, the gestural moments to move in, the creating of space, the soft edges to be around. The materials really tell us whether they will or won't do that, and that's really so the bigger radius curves of Woodcraft there, the gestural moments to invite you in, that the bricks would do that pretty easily. We just halve the brick and turn the corner. And tighter curves, we moved away from bricks to use another material.
There's a question we have from Stephen Pierce, who I think is actually doing a community centre himself. So he's asked what systems or suppliers do you use for your windows?
Hi, Steve. We specified the window type, but we didn't have a say in the contractor. The builder chose the contractor to our specification. And whilst we had hold points through the project where we could inspect the section to make sure it's and with these sort of projects, it's this section or the equivalent. I think we used an equivalent section here, and we just had a whole point to check that it was really the type of window and door system that we wanted to have, which it was, so that was fine. So I don't think I really answered your question, Steve, but I'll see you around the traps and I'll be able to tell you more.
We have an anonymous person, maybe it's a family member, I'm not sure, but they've asked, which I think you sort of touched on anyway, but the inspiration on the shape of the roof at Woodcraft. But I think you kind of touched on some of that, but was there more of an inspiration around that?
Look, all architecture is referential. I think probably a very honest answer is, as architects, we're great collagists. We see lots of wonderful buildings. I can think some of the beautiful curved roof buildings that I've seen over the years. Moralis's markets. There's been others in Japan that just fallen straight off the top of my head. But really we're looking for quite a gestural thing. And this is a brutally honest answer with Woodcraft. That roof needed to be seen as obvious architecture. We didn't want it to be an architecture for architects, which is something we really do appreciate, and it can be lovely and quiet. But given the circumstance in which that building was lost, was burnt down by members of the public, we wanted them to see, and this was also under Bill Zakalos's great lead and within Blacktown Council of wanting the buildings to be a higher standard of architecture, so that people could see that the council were really investing in the public building. So it needed to be a very obvious and visual cue that the architecture was a little bit special. So playing with different forms of roofs that would try and frame out that golden mean, the curve was the one that best handled it. So drawing on the imagery of what we'd seen in the past, I guess that becomes a reference, even if it's subconscious.
There was a question around the forbidden courtyard and whether it was a result of spatial limitations. I know you mentioned one of them where you had, I guess, essentially, definitely some limitations on the width of the building, but was more for those reasons or design preferences?
Well, look, usually they come about, I think all the courtyards have the possibility to be inhabited if you wanted to get in them. Some of them are really tight, so I'm not sure necessarily what you would get beyond more a quality that a veranda would bring. Usually a veranda or a balcony off a room is not so much necessarily about that veranda, but the quality it gives the space just beyond it, the space or the prospect beyond. Where we turn them into the gardens or the forbidden gardens where you look at them, it's really a conversation with the client. I guess central to all this and overarching even these 5 ideas is understanding that we are architects that are providing a service, and we're very conscious of that. These buildings need to become our clients' buildings, they're not our buildings. So the courtyards or these spaces that become gardens are definitely part of the conversation. So for Irene's, for example, with Irene and Peters for Concrete Blonde, this was that conversation of anchoring the living spaces with 2 gardens either side. It was a fairly tight space. We didn't need to use it for an outdoor space, so we used it as this lovely green screen that would clean the air as it allowed the room to breathe, but also this beautiful garden to look at. You can touch when you sit in the wall. So that's really the driver of those ideas.
So if anyone has any other questions you want to put through there, there is one. Peter Farman has said the terrace project generates a synergy between the plan and section through the use of the arch element that was part of the original terrace. The plan and section in this project generate spatial delight and equally seem to organise. So I guess he's not sure.
Is that a Tony Jones moment? Well, thank you. We'll take that as a comment.
I guess. Yeah.
I think that's a lovely interpretation of the building. So I'll take that.
No problem. So doesn't look as though we've got too many other sort of questions coming through there, but I guess we might leave it there then. And Shaun, thanks for your time tonight. It's really appreciated. You know, and I know we had you know, quite a good size audience there who I'm sure all have appreciated your talk, and there's a few sort of thank yous and that coming through from different people. So on behalf of Brickworks, thank you very much for being part of the series, and we'll no doubt speak with you soon.
Oh, thank you, Nathan, and thank you everyone for listening. I do appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.